it's great to be able to join you all, and I'm always a little nervous following Bihn, because Bihn is a pretty gregarious presenter. Luckily, we gave him something boring like the Preventive Controls Alliance. While we're waiting, I could tell this lovely story. Bihn and I, a number of years ago, were at a meeting. This has nothing to do with anything other than it's just kind of funny. So we were at a meeting, and we didn't really know each other. We're there, and we're coming into the lunch, you know, to sit down at a group lunch where you have to sit with 8 people you don't know to eat lunch. And Bihn walks up, and I'm like, "Hey, Bihn, I was involved in a foodborne illness outbreak." And Bihn goes, "Oh, cool, me too. We can talk about how to collect poop." And I thought, oh my God, these poor other 6 people at our table have no idea what they have signed themselves up for. And then later in that day, Bihn and I were in the same presentation group, giving presentations on, I was not talking about my involvement in an outbreak, but Bihn was talking about his, and Bihn, while suffering a foodborne illness himself, cataloged it with pictures. And I thought at that moment, he is such a better extension educator than I am. As he's got a picture of his toilet with his poop collection system, and any of you that follow the Barf blog will know that Bihn regularly takes pictures of his children who have vomited all over the floor, and so he is just way, way better. So I always am a little hesitant following him, and was really happy that I got to follow the preventive controls talk, because that's really, you know, he's part of that, but he's not driving that train. So, okay. So I was tasked with talking about the Produce Safety Alliance, and essentially you're going to get that, but you're also going to get more, because sometimes I just can't stop myself when I get thinking about these things while riding on a plane and bored when there's terrible turbulence. I know the first speaker really talked about what was in the FSMA overall, but I just wanted to give you a highlight that these are the areas that are covered in the produce rule. Ag water, and that includes both production and post-harvest water, and that's a key thing to think about. Their ag water definition includes water you're using for irrigation, frost protection, great, as well as the water you're using for post-harvest, which is kind of an interesting thought. Biological soil amendments, domestic and wild animals, personal qualifications training, we call this health, hygiene, and training, right? This is all the people stuff. And equipment, tools, buildings, and sanitation. So that's essentially what you're going to get of the FSMA rule from me. The rest is going to be my take on it. So the FSMA time frame in theory, and this is to give you anybody how many people are working directly with farmers? Okay, boy, am I going to bore the rest of you people. Okay, so if you're working with farmers, I like to show this slide because this is my slide to tell everybody, do not panic, okay? It doesn't mean don't do anything. It just means don't panic. We've got time. Let's get something moving so that we're ready when the rule gets here, okay? And I just want to stress that when you look out here, if the final rule is published sometime in the fall of 2015, you know, our small growers have a long time to get up here, and there's also an extended period for the water requirements, okay? So I just want you to have that in your mind. Again, don't not do something, but just don't panic, okay? Because if you think about this constructively and you think long term, we can put processes in place and training in place to make sure nobody's left out in the cold. And I know the first gentleman that spoke was talking about, you know, how we need to support our farmers. Okay, so the Produce Safety Alliance is a cooperative agreement between Cornell, FDA, and USDA. The real focus is on education and outreach to farmers, regulators, and others interested. Okay, why would we have to do outreach to regulators? Produce has never been regulated before. So we have a lot of people who are used to bumming around in processing plants, but they've never been on a farm. And there are things on the farm that are not processing plants, despite the fact that there's some discussion that the two are the same. Okay, I'm going to argue that they're not. And we're going to talk about that. Our target audiences, again, growers, packers, those people that are doing on-farm packing, grower cooperatives with special emphasis on small and very small scale packing houses. That is taken directly out of the cooperative agreement, okay? And my position as director of the Produce Safety Alliance, when I write grants and I bring in money, I get to be the decider. In a cooperative agreement, I'm more like the captain of a sailboat in a storm, right? My job is to stay on the ship and keep hold of the steering wheel. But there's a lot of other things that influence how these things go because we have an executive committee, a steering committee, working committees, right? Okay. regulatory personnel, and anyone else interested. The primary goals, again, are this outreach and understanding. I want to highlight on good agricultural practices, which seems logical, we all should know that, but also this piece of co-management. Does anybody know what the definition of co-management is? Someone from the audience? I didn't bring candy to throw at your head. Anybody want to know, anyone want to guess or state what co-management is? Okay. Co-management is managing not only your food safety issues on the farm and your goals, but also managing your environmental programs, right? A lot of our farmers have NRCS money. They have set aside land. What does that land do? Oh, I don't know, you put in grass that attracts what? Wildlife. And then the food safety people go, you're attracting wildlife. They're going to poop on your produce. And you go, but I'm supposed to be having this set aside land. So how do you balance that? That is what growers need to do with co-management. And it can be done, but you got to know what you're doing. And that's why, that's one of the new things with the PSA that was a new concept. Okay. We're also charged with collecting information, and I'm going to show you one of the things we did to do that so that you can all go to the Produce Safety Alliance website and know that you'll get access to other universities that have good materials, okay? Not just Cornell. We also, and this is the thing we've spent the primary amount of time on, developing a standardized training and education program that incorporates co-management and all these other food safety concepts that can be used nationwide. Okay, any of you that have worked with academia know that academics have a lot of programs going on. They want to use their own stuff. So this is an uphill battle, trying to create a nationwide curriculum. But I want to show you some of the steps we did to make sure people knew this was not Cornell University developing a curriculum that you have to use. We really tried a large feedback type system that allowed us to do this. As proposed, training will be required. Maybe they're going to change that, but right now, the proposed regulation states that farmers must get food safety training. And collaboration is really important because nationwide there aren't that many food safety professionals, and there's a lot of farmers. So we have to play well together to make it functional for everyone. So the first thing we did, got the money in the fall of 2010. First thing we did was have an educational materials conference. Why? Because there's lots of good programs at universities, at industry groups from around the U.S. We wanted to get all that information, get those people together. Acknowledge all the work that's already been done. Okay, we were not starting from zero. We wanted to jump off of the highest platform possible. Gathered and cataloged this information. You can get it all on the PSA website. And it really highlighted the value and the need for collaboration and training networks. Okay, we all need to work together to make sure our farmers across the nation are well trained and well supported. So what was our curriculum development process? And I just told Faith that I collapsed 8 slides into one, so forgive me for that. But so here's how we started it. We identified gaps, challenges specific to small farms. Why would we do that? Because a lot of the big farms have already been captured, right? Cantaloupe growers, leafy greens growers, the 06 outbreak. These people have been brought along, but the very small farmers selling into CSAs, selling into farm markets, those people really hadn't been assessed. So we got working committees. We had 10 working committees. We had 72 calls over a 1.5 year period. And you can see from this graph right here, the darker color had more people. Here's Tennessee right there. You guys had 2 people participating. But there were people from farmers from these areas, regulatory people from these areas, industry people from these areas, who got together on these calls to identify what are the food safety challenges that exist on small farms. Okay. From there, we went ahead and set goals. Okay, if we have all these risks, what are going to be our goals here? How are we going to address these risks and all of that? From there, we developed learning objectives. Okay, so if we're going to do a curriculum, here we have challenges. Here's the things we really want to address. But what are the real learning objectives? When I take this curriculum, what am I going to learn? Okay? And then finally, create the content that makes you understand these learning objectives to get to solving and risk reduction in these areas, okay? This process is in final review right now, all right? And we also did, aside from these things, we also did 8 nationwide grower focus groups. So we went out, got groups of 10, 12 farmers together, and sat them down and said, okay, here's what was identified in the working committees. Does this make sense to you? What would you like to add? What are things that might be missing, okay? So, take all that stuff together, this process that took from those calls started in May of 11 and finished in the beginning of 2013. We did all the learning objectives. It ends up that there's 7 hours of dedicated curriculum with these modules. Worker health, hygiene, and training. You will note that lines up very well with what you saw in the produce rule. Water. We have 2 sections of water, production water and post-harvest water, because they're different. Soil amendments, wildlife and domestic animals, equipment, facilities, equipment, and tools, which is really the sanitation. Now look at this one. How to develop a farm food safety plan. That's not a requirement in the regulation. So why is it in our curriculum? It's in our curriculum because having worked with growers through the focus groups, through the working committees, growers feel like they need to have a plan. I need to know what I'm doing. So although it is not required by the regulation, it is included in the curriculum because in the end, we want growers to be doing the right thing to reduce risks. It's not just about meeting regulatory requirement, but it's about reducing risks practically at the farm. Okay? So our current work, we've got one last review of the final PSA slide sets that is at our steering committee and our executive committee. A little bit about our 2 committees. Our steering committee is made up of the chairs. Each working committee had 2 chairs. Our steering committee is made up of all of those chairs. The reason we did it that way was we wanted to double check that we had addressed the things that happened in the working committees, right? So by having all those chairs, there's that double check. Our executive committee is made up of the funders, so FDA, USDA, also made up of people from NRCS for the co-management piece. Okay, so that's sort of the oversight of the funders that gave us that. We're finishing an AFTO contract. The Association of Food and Drug Officials will hold the certificates. So when a grower goes through a training and gets the certificate, they will hold that so in a regulatory environment, growers can prove they have met that stipulation to be trained. Okay, so we're finalizing that. Determining trainer qualification requirements. What that really addresses is there's 2 camps of folks. One, we know we got a lot of growers. We don't have a lot of people that have experience. So we want to make sure that the trainers are qualified because we don't want trainers telling growers to do something that's unnecessary or risky. So how do we make sure they're competent to be trainers? And currently, after several iterations, we're looking at a shadowing process where you go through a Train the Trainer course. Some of you in this room may want to go through the Train the Trainer course. And then when you offer your first training, somebody will come shadow you to make sure you are providing the appropriate content. Okay, so we're working on that. And we're in the process of picking a location to pilot the Train the Trainer. So we want to try it, make sure it works, get all the bugs worked out before we make it go live. Our future work, and when I say future, I mean starting this fall, hopefully, we will be having Train the Trainer workshops around the country to build qualified networks of trainers for our farmers. Now, if I go all the way back, remember I said don't panic? We're actually going to start training people before the final rule. Okay? And some discussion is, why would you do that before the final rule? And the reason we're going to do that is, let me go forward here just to show you this. Produce farms exempt or not covered by the produce rule. Nationwide, there's 189,000 total produce farmers. 149,000 of them are likely to be exempt. Okay, so does that mean we don't care about what they're doing on their farms because they're exempt from this regulation? No. I also mentioned earlier that produce has never been regulated before. So we've got a lot of work to do that we can do now before I tell you, oh yeah, the water, it's not 126, they've really decided it's 235. That kind of information we can double back on, but we want to get them started now. Okay, so the details of the regulation, again, because AFTO will hold their certificates, we will know everybody who's been trained. And if the rule turns out to be slightly different, we're hoping for no more than 50%, let me say that, right? We're hoping we'll be 85% correct. But if there's a 15%, we'll be able to double back on that information. Does that make sense? It's a lot different than preventive controls. So that's why we're moving forward with that. Okay. So, and the other thing that's important here is we have growers in the marketplace right now who are getting calls from buyers saying, Do you have an audit? Do you have a plan? Do you have this? We need to help them now. We don't need to wait until the regulation. That's another key piece of why we're moving forward. All of this stuff I have talked about can be seen at the Produce Safety Alliance website. I mean everything. You want to bore yourself to death, can't sleep? Go ahead and read some of those working committee notes. It'll put you right to sleep there. I would really stress anyone, go to the PSA website and join our listserv. Okay, we don't spam it. We try to send out monthly, every couple of month newsletters to highlight programs. It's a very good way to stay connected to what's going on with the PSA. She mentioned that they're going to re-release certain parts. When that happens, we'll let you know. We'll tell you how to comment, all of that stuff. So if you're interested, please go there to join. The other thing that's on that website is before the last comment period closed, we had calls with FDA to talk about every section of the rule. And those are recorded. So you can go listen. We had farmers call in, bring up some really, really key points that were really important. Okay, so it's a good place to get other information. Okay, I have some time, right, left. So I want to talk about a few other things that I think are really important related to this. We already talked about the fact that there's a lot of growers that are going to be exempt. Growers may be exempt from the regulation, but they are not exempt from the marketplace. So what I think is going to happen, I could be totally wrong, but what I think is going to happen is this. As soon as we have a final regulation, a bunch of buyers are going to look at the regulation and go, I don't care if you're exempt or not. You need to follow it. It's the law of the land. Exempt or not, I want you following those rules. Okay, so we can't leave these guys out in the cold. Things in the produce rule that will be tough for growers, as is currently written. Might change, but as is currently written, these are things that are going to be troublesome. Weekly water testing. Weekly water testing is going to be problematic for several reasons. One, access to qualified labs that offer you the test that you get. The cost and usefulness and the accepted and effective in-field treatments for water that doesn't meet the standards. That could be problematic. Okay? The water testing labs in New York State, I don't know about Tennessee, but in New York State, some of our guys in really rural areas, the closest lab is 3 to 4 hours away. If you're going to take a water sample and send somebody off the farm to drive 3 or 4 hours to drop it off, turn around and drive it back, you've just wasted a day. If you're the only person on your farm, that is a day off the farm per week. That is not sustainable. So you say, okay, well, I'll just overnight ship it. Sometimes overnight shipping doesn't come to your neck of the woods either, right? So there's just a lot of things that could be very, very troublesome for our growers. Increase in manure application timetables. Right now, most people follow the NOP 120 days manure application to harvest. The new one stretches it to 9 months. Okay, that's a significant stretch for a lot of these guys, especially in states that have animal agriculture and lots of manure available. The other thing is you can do composting, but you have to set that up and the increased cost and land use that goes with that. Other challenges, and this is the one I always love talking to Bihn about. So currently, there are things in the produce rule that if growers do, will advance them to the Preventative Controls Alliance. And I can tell you, those people are not ready for these farmers to come in the back door. They're not. They're just not prepared for that. Things like handling and buying other people's produce. This happens all the time. It may not even be above board. It may be trading produce, but they do it all the time, okay? Normal harvest procedures counting as processing. If you go back and listen to that recording, we had a leek grower call in on that thing. And he said, well, I know I'm allowed to harvest them, but then I like to bunch them and cut off the greens so that they're all the same size when I sell them. And the FDA goes, that's a processing cut. Welcome to Preventive Controls Alliance. Okay, that's not a processing cut, right? But so we need to address some of these things. Understanding when you are and are not subject to the new rule. So I have growers that say, in most years, I won't buy produce from somebody else. But if I lose a crop, and I'm known at the market for selling strawberries, then you can bet I'm going to go find strawberries to buy, right? So if I cross out into preventive controls, how do I get back over the line, right? How do I get back into the produce rule? And those are all things that need to be settled because we don't actually know the answer to that. And I would like to say this, farms are not processing plants. And when we look at post-harvest challenges, I just talked to the guy from 2 Manufacturing yesterday about this. We have a lack of sanitary design in the equipment that's used on our farms. In New York, we have 2 manufacturing, but I can tell you 2 manufacturing builds a vegetable pack line that looks like 8 other manufacturers in the country that I've talked to. There's a Midwestern one, there's one down south. They all build a very similar looking piece of machinery. You can't take the brushes out of that thing. You can take the brushes out of that thing, but you will never get the machine back together. Okay? So the guy called me yesterday. He's like, somebody told me they want to take them out daily. They ain't coming out daily. And I said, I know, but they do want you to take them out daily. So these are things that we need to work on. Lack of infrastructure. I had a guy on an audit. You're going to love this. I had a guy get an audit from some audit company, and he had a dirt floor. He was packing tomatoes. It was a dry pack, no water. He got points taken off because he didn't have a drain in his dirt floor. True story. Which I told my food safety professionals, and they said, no drain, where's he going to keep his listeria? So these are serious problems we have, right? Lack of understanding of GMP requirements. Fresh produce is exempt from GMPs. These guys are not used to reading the Code of Federal Regulation and thinking it applies to them. Okay, so they're really not prepared to go up. The difference between cleaning and sanitizing, I have another really great story. I was talking to a farmer who had a chicken operation as well as produce. And I was telling him, okay, you got to have a detergent to get rid of whatever your problem is. Is it carbohydrate, fat, protein? And then you apply a sanitizer. And we took a break, and he comes up to me, and he's like, so I slaughter chickens on Mondays and Wednesdays, and I pack produce on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays. And this whole thing about detergents, he's like, I use this sanitizer, and I wipe the tables off. And I said, no, you got to do clean. You got to do the detergent first, clean it off. And then once that's cleaned off, then you can apply a sanitizer. Because I said, you got to get rid of whatever the thing is. And in your animal operation, it's mostly going to be fat, right? And he goes, oh, is that why the tables are greasy? Yeah, to which I tried to stop my eyes from bugging out of my head, but all I said was, okay, so we're not going to pack produce anymore until we figure this out, right? Right? We're not going to pack, because he's been doing this for how long on his greasy tables? This is the kind of problems we have. And access to appropriate chemicals, detergents, sanitizers, and I'm going to say volumes. Okay, here's the deal. You don't know you need detergents. You don't know you need sanitizers. You certainly have no idea what you're looking at. You finally connect them with a guy, small farm operation. You connect them with a guy, say Ecolab. The smallest volume of Ecolab sanitizer you can get is 4 gallons. 4 gallons. You use a tablespoon in roughly 10 gallons of water. You now have 4 gallons of this stuff floating around your farm. And it has to be in a loose kip thing because it off gases. You can't carry it in your car. I'm not dogging Ecolab. What I'm just saying is that the chemical companies haven't even thought about the small farmers. BioSafe, which is another company that growers like to use, does have like a half gallon or a gallon jug from certain suppliers. But these are problems we're running into with small farms. So if you have a little dump bucket that takes 10 gallons of water, that 4 gallons will last you forever, or at least several seasons. Okay, so the other thing is produce safety market issues. There's lots of different requirements from buyers. We all know the harmonized audit, trying to get it down to something that's understandable. Lack of streamlining and consistency, lots of requirements and little data to show reduction in risks. If you read some of these audits, there are things growers are required to do that you wonder to yourself, what risk am I reducing here? Okay, and you have a small farmer. Him and his wife run the operation. They are not going to do 400 new things. You'd be good to get them to do the top 5 that might kill somebody, but you're not going to get them to do 200. Okay, and I think that's also a concern. What reduction in risks are we expecting, right? And that's important to consider. What are the risks now? We don't even know what is going on most of our farms from a microbiological standpoint. So really thinking about what reduction are we looking for. And it's also really important to prioritize it when you have limited time, money, and people, right? Because you can't do everything. So we really want them to focus on what are the key things. Which brings me to things we can do in terms of incorporating. This is one idea to incorporate the PSA curriculum. I really need to quit yapping. I got time, right? Do I have like 5? A couple more minutes. Okay. This is one thing we've done in New York State. This is what I think will work in most states. First of all, take the PSA curriculum and turn it into a multi-day training for our smaller farmers, okay? What we do is growers need this training, but they also need to meet market demand. You can't create one template that fits all farmers. It won't work because they're all different. All right. So day one, you improve their produce safety knowledge by using that 7-hour curriculum the PSA is going to have. It'll be all right there. You go through that. You help them understand the risks, give them a chance to vent, and contains lots of real life examples. And it's conducted in the off season so they can go, right? Day two, you bring their computers, you give them a jump drive with a template, and you make them write their own plan with you in the room. That way they can take the knowledge they learned in day one, apply it in day two. It's great. In New York, we have a day three, which is the mock audit. They love it even if they don't want an audit. They go out to a farmer volunteers his farm, volunteers his plan, an auditor comes out, does the audit, they all get to experience it. It's a great learning experience. Even if they don't want an audit, they now know what they're supposed to be doing. Key to success is collaboration. We can't all do it ourselves. We need to work together with auditors, extension personnel, industry personnel, buyers to make this all happen. The one I want to leave you with is this. Tennessee, Cornell, and Minnesota, we created a bunch of decision trees that were meant to help small growers prioritize where to spend their money and their time. Okay? This is on our website, not the Produce Safety Alliance website, but the GAPS website, gaps.cornell.edu. If you're interested in this, you can see the 9 decision trees. All right? And with that, thank you, and I'll take questions or run away so Ben can go again.